Now, even though HBO Max has recently made some big changes that I am not a fan of, I still think they offer some of the best movies on any streaming service, some of the biggest, best movies, but they also have some fantastic hidden gem movies, and we're going to talk about 18 of them, my number 18 pick being one of the more recently released HBO original movies, Reality. This is actually an HBO original movie that just released this year, and it's based on the true story of Reality winner. Now, if that name isn't familiar and you never heard of her story in the news, actually the less you know about this story, the better. But the way it was filmed is why it makes the list. The script is actually taken word for word from the recordings done during this interrogation. She rolls up to her house, there's a couple of FBI agents, and again, the dialogue in this movie is very odd feeling because it just doesn't feel like a movie. I mean, there's little banter and things there that just doesn't sound very well crafted. It sounds clumsy and natural, but when you know that there's something fishy going on, it's all very unsettling. Now, this is a short movie. It takes place in one location. It's not a very pretty location either, but Sydney Sweeney, the lead here, is fantastic, and all the supporting actors are really great as well, making Reality feel much more like reality than most movies. Now, my number 17 pick is also based on a true story and actually stars Greg Kinnear as the inventor of the windshield wiper, or rather the modern-day intermittent windshield wiper. But the movie's not just about his invention, it's also about how automakers stole his idea and he took them to court and really tried to argue the ownership of an idea, and it's all very interesting stuff. If you like courtroom dramas, there's great elements there. If you like just true historical stories, there's great stuff there. And even really good sort of business-centric movies like The Big Short and more recently Air, then I think you're really gonna love Flash of Genius as well. My next pick on this list is titled The Bronze, and it's actually a pretty hard-nosed comedy about a young lady who finished third in the Olympics, earning a bronze medal, and has let missing her goal of getting a gold basically destroy her life. Not just her life, but destroy and erode her entire personality.
You're cutting off my allowance and you want me to stop stealing? What kind of a sick monster are you?
Really just kind of turning her into a total piece of shit. And she's kind of a local celebrity. She's kind of stuck being this famous gymnast, and it is really funny. You've got great comedy actors like Gary Cole in this as well. And aside from being funny, the themes all work really well with the bronze. I mean, you understand what she's going through, why, and then she's trying to train this other up-and-coming Olympian, and there's some heart to this movie as well, but it's also just kind of crass and not overly vulgar, but she's got a potty mouth on her in this movie.
Them so hard I'll rip their in half. Then I'll wear one part of the and I'll lock it around my neck. Give the other half lock it to your mom. Just shove up.
Hot Summer Nights stars Timothée Chalamet and Maika Monroe in a coming-of-age story that takes place over the summer of 1991. Even though it's 91, the movie itself feels very much like an 80s movie. It takes place in Cape Cod, and Chalamet's character actually begins dealing pot, not just to his friends, but to drug dealers, and he starts getting in really deep over the course of one summer. If you're not in the mood for a coming-of-age story laced with some crime, then don't worry, I've got some other bangers on this list for you.
It's all right, though, sis. It's a good sign when you feel a little bad.
Deadfall actually stars Eric Bana as a bad guy, something he doesn't do that often. You've also got Olivia Wilde, and the main character is actually played by Charlie Hunnam in this movie, and he does a great job of carrying it. Bana and Wilde actually play a couple of criminals immediately after a casino heist, and they're trying to hide all this money out in the wilderness. The plot reminds me a bit of A Simple Plan, yet not quite as good, but still a solid thriller with some fairly interesting twists and turns. Now, one of the artsier movies on this list is from director Jim Jarmusch, and it's one of his earlier movies, Down by Law. Now, this actually stars Tom Waits. He and a couple of other inmates actually escape from this southern prison and don't just go on the lam, but basically try to live off the grid. Now, if you're not familiar with Jim Jarmusch's work, this movie does not feel like your typical movie. There's not really a plot driving it forward. Rather, it's more of a collection of scenes and conversations where the plot itself, I've basically explained already. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Yet, if you're a fan of Tom Waits or artsier films like this, think movies directed by Wes Anderson, then this movie might be right up your alley. In fact, some of you, it could be your new favorite movie. But if you tend to not like slower paced, dialogue-heavy movies, then I can tell you right now, Down by Law is not gonna be for you. Now, my next pick actually culminates in the 1992 LA riots, but it has nothing to do with the Rodney King case. In Dark Blue, Kurt Russell actually plays a corrupt LAPD cop. Again, this has nothing to do with the actual events. Rather, this is a fictional story that coincides with that one, and then you actually do see some of the LA riots depicted in this movie. Ving Rhames also stars in this, and it's actually from the writer of Training Day. I would not put this movie in the same league as a movie like Training Day, but still, it is a fantastic movie about corrupt LAPD cops. And then topping off my bottom 10 on this list, keep in mind we still got my top 10 to go, I've got Hotel Artemis. Now, this movie did not quite deliver what I wanted, but if you go into this one with the right expectations, I think you can have a lot of fun with it. This kind of has the guise of an action movie, yet there's little to no action actually in the movie. Rather, this one too is fairly dialogue heavy, but you get very interesting characters from a wide range of actors, including Jodie Foster, Sterling K. Brown, who actually kind of carries this movie, but you've also got a really maniacal role from Jeff Goldblum, which is fantastic. Dave Bautista is exceptional in this. Charlie Day, Sofia Boutella, I mean, it's a fantastic cast, and don't get me wrong, there is some action in it, but rather, you've got kind of a collection of assassins that are hashing things out, trying not to die, and it's got a fantastic look and feel. The color palette's really amazing. If anything, this movie really just kind of falls short of being pretty exceptional and great, which is why it almost squeaked into my top 10. Now, if you're in a different country, or maybe you're just watching this movie way in the future and these movies are not available on a HBO Max, or Max as it's called now, you can still access them using today's sponsor, Cyberghost. Now, like all VPNs, Cyberghost does a great job of keeping your web browsing safe, secure, and private. In case you don't know, people are looking and they're trying to get your information. You need to have one for protection. It is a must nowadays, but if you're gonna use one, you might as well use one, and I recommend that will allow you to watch way more movies and shows than you could ever possibly hope to watch. And the way they do that is because there's different things available in different countries around the world, and with a Cyberghost account, you can just flick a switch and tell your computer or your streaming device that you're in the UK, Australia, Canada, and immediately access everything they have there on various streaming services, including Netflix, Prime Video, and more. Cyberghost is super easy to use. You do not need to be tech savvy at all in order to take advantage of this service, and they have 24/7 customer support in case you do need some help. But you're going to be able to use it on up to 7 devices at the exact same time, and it's all the different devices you're already using to stream movies and shows. And my viewers can get it for less than $3 a month when they use the link in the description below. That's less than the cost of one new release movie rental to unlock way more movies and shows than you could ever possibly hope to watch. I mean, really, you could cancel one of your streaming services, get Cyberghost for less money, and still access way more movies and shows than you could access now. Again, just go to that link in the description. It's a great deal. They even offer a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you can use it for a month and a half and cancel it, getting you a full refund. Again, fantastic stuff. But speaking of fantastic stuff, let's slow things down a bit and talk about the top 10 movies on this list. Adrian Brody stars in my next pick, which is a dark sci-fi thriller titled The Jacket. In this movie, he actually plays a veteran of the Gulf War who is mistakenly sent to an institution for the criminally insane. Not only does he not belong there, which is upsetting enough, but he's then subject to the kind of wild experiments of this doctor played by Chris Christopherson. Brad Renfro was in this before he died, Daniel Craig before he was famous, Jennifer Jason Leigh before she had her big comeback, Keira Knightley is in this. But there is kind of a twist at play that makes the movie even more interesting. By no means is this a masterpiece. I'm not trying to oversell it, but it is a fantastic, twisted thriller. If you ever like anything taking place in an insane asylum, then The Jacket is definitely going to be for you. My number 9 pick changes the tone up quite a bit though, with one of Robin Williams' more underrated roles in Cadillac Man.
No, wife? No wife, no, ex-wife.
He's a busy boy, you're Joey, a very busy boy.
Madonna, Tina, Chuck, Lola.
Now this is one of his more underrated roles because it's just such a different kind of movie. This too basically takes place over the course of one day, or at least the bulk of the movie does. He plays a Cadillac dealer who is a real womanizer. He's got quite a few fingers and quite a few pies. And then when one of the husbands of these ladies, played by Tim Robbins, shows up at his Cadillac dealership with a gun, the movie just takes a turn and becomes a hostage negotiation style of a movie. Again, Robin Williams is fantastic in this movie. The role itself actually requires quite a bit from him, quite a bit of subtlety from Robin Williams as well, and he nails all of it. He really is just one of the greatest actors of all time, and you can really see it in this movie as well. But if the hook and the setup and plot aren't quite enough to get you interested, while this is a fantastic movie and it's all delivered really well, it's not a strong recommendation from me unless you're interested in the way I've set it up. Now, my number 8 pick is a highly underrated, and I'm really not sure why, espionage flick that actually stars Chris Cooper in an amazing role and Ryan Phillippe in a pretty decent one.
Are you finding this job stressful?
Sometimes.
Pray more.
Now, this is the true story of a Russian double agent operating inside the FBI. This was major national news, and this movie actually does a pretty good job of depicting it. However, it does go into sort of your formulaic thriller territory, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just ends up feeling a little bit more run-of-the-mill than just a real true, hard-hitting movie about a true story. In fact, if you did not know this was a true story, it feels very much like a work of fiction, mainly because some of the twists here are so wild. But again, Chris Cooper, he's an amazing actor and he does a fantastic job of threading the needle with this movie. If you ever like any kind of espionage flicks, this is going to be the one for you. This one's just exceptional because it happens to be true and it's something that has happened in fairly recent memory. My next pick on this list, though, is one of the more underrated movies to ever star Oscar Isaac or Jessica Chastain in A Most Violent Year. This writer-director would actually go on to do 999 for Netflix, and then the Marvel movie Kraven the Hunter, which is yet to release, but A Most Violent Year is not an action movie. In fact, I recommend this highly for gangster movie lovers. And the reason there's not a ton of action in this movie is because the main character is not a gangster. He's an immigrant and a business owner who does need and use the protection of the mob, and that deal with the devil ends up coming at a cost. And the movie itself is beautifully shot. Again, the story is at a snail's pace, but if you generally like this genre, then Most Violent Year is packed with wonderful performances and amazing look at 1980s New York. So if any of that tickles your fancy, then A Most Violent Year is an exceptional film. Now we're going to dial the clock all the way back to 1971 with the oldest movie on this particular list, a cult classic that has had remakes, The Omega Man. In this movie, Charlton Heston wakes up to find out he is the last man on Earth. Now, this is technically a remake of The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price, and would later be remade into I Am Legend with Will Smith. Each of the three movies is fairly different though, and I happen to be partial to The Omega Man. It's got this fantastic, pulpy, sort of cult movie look and feel from the 70s. There's actually some great shots of an abandoned Los Angeles in this movie, and it goes into some weird, twisted territories. It is not a zombie movie the way I Am Legend sort of turns into one. The Omega Man is somehow much weirder, but if you like classic 70s movies, if you enjoy Mad Max, anything like that, then I think there's a lot to love with The Omega Man. Two legends make my number 5 pick with Tom Hardy and James Gandolfini in The Drop.
All your money in the bag.
Do you know what you're doing? Do you know whose money you're jacking?
Fill the bag!
You don't see anything? Nah, you know, that's this neighborhood, right?
This too is a gangster movie for gangster movie lovers that doesn't quite feel like a gangster movie. It's worth noting this is from the same writer behind Mystic River and Gone Baby Gone, and I would put this movie in a similar wheelhouse. In this movie, Tom Hardy works at a bar where money is dropped off. It is actually called The Drop, and it's the mob's money. And when someone knocks it off one night, it really puts him in a pretty tough position. Now, he plays a fantastic character as usual. Gandolfini is obviously great, but you've also got Noomi Rapace and a handful of other really fantastic actors in this. The movie's got a good look to it. It is slower paced, kind of like A Most Violent Year, but if that does not bother you at all, I would say those two movies would make an incredible, really incredible, double feature on HBO Max right now. Now, in the sponsored portion of the video, I've already explained how you could unlock these movies if they're not available to you right now, wherever you are in the world, but I've also gone through the trouble of listing out where you can stream every movie on this list in Canada, the UK, and Australia, along with other places you could stream some of these if you don't have HBO Max here in the US. So again, just go down to that top pinned comment. You'll see the full list of movies where you can stream them aside from HBO Max around the world, again, including here in the US. My number 4 pick is a dark one, but it is an incredibly interesting and highly underrated serial killer flick. It's titled Citizen X. This is a haunting true story that takes place in Russia, and it's about a vicious serial killer who preys on children and really anyone he can get his hands on. There's some upsetting moments in the movie, but as far as serial killer hunt movies go, my goodness, this is a great one, and it exposes a lot of the problems and fallacies in the way Russia was governed. Basically, the hubris of the government at that time was in such a state that they preferred to claim Russia doesn't have serial killers, that that's an American problem, and they just don't exist in Russia, causing this guy to go on a tear, killing untold amounts of people. It's really terrible stuff, but you really do follow one of the key investigators who's trying to bring him to justice. And again, really, if you love movies or documentaries about true crime or serial killers, Citizen X is one of the best to just kind of gone largely unnoticed by mass audiences. Now, I know I've had a fair amount of crime on this particular list. It happens to be one of my favorite genres, but in terms of lower budget movies, there also happens to be a lot of really great low budget movies made as crime stories. My next pick being an incredible example, NARC.
That's beautiful. Bubble bath, earful of tunes, smoking some hubbin', this is how the evening ends.
Now, even though this does star Ray Liotta, this is a fairly low budget movie, and it was a first feature film for director Joe Carnahan. This movie was so good and so well received that Tom Cruise actually hired Carnahan to direct Mission Impossible 3. He would later turn it down, but NARC is one hell of a directorial debut. It's dark, it's grungy, it's gritty, it feels very realistic and has some amazing dialogue. Ray Liotta is a monster in this movie, and he really does a fantastic job even when he's chewing up the scenery. And Jason Patric's amazing too. I mean, I've never been a big fan of his in any kind of way, or rather there's no performances of his that really stand out to me as phenomenal, with the exception of NARC. I mean, he carries the movie. Not only is it just a good police procedural type movie, but there's quite a bit of heavy questions that the movie asks of the viewer and the main characters, and you actually get some answers with NARC as well, which is just really, I'm telling you, it's just top-notch stuff. My next pick also being a crime movie, but my goodness, man, this one is just a real killer flick with some powerhouse performances. It actually comes from Australia and is titled Animal Kingdom.
Now you're not in any danger. What do you think we should do?
What's wrong, huh?
What's after it?
There's actually an American crime series that's a spin-off of this show. It takes place in Los Angeles, but revolves around a fairly ordinary family that commits quite a bit of crime. The thing that's so cool about Animal Kingdom, though, is you're not actually seeing many or really any of the crimes carried out, but you're seeing what life is like for these criminals. And I'll be honest, the movie itself is a little slow and dull in the first third. Takes a little bit of setup, but once the movie decides to pop off, it is just an electric flick. Now, Don't get me wrong, there's not a lot of action in this movie. There's little to none. In fact, it's fairly dialogue heavy, but it doesn't quite feel like it. All of the things that these guys are doing and everything that's happening is insanely interesting, and then it ultimately goes to a wild and just very memorable place. It's the only way I'm gonna leave you with that one, but the movie does leave you with something, and I thought it was just a real fantastic ending. I've watched this several times over the years, and I enjoy it every time, even though it can be pretty grim at times. And then my number one pick is so good that even though it's foreign language, most of the movie is in Norwegian, and you're gonna have to read subtitles through a fairly complicated movie, which is really never fun to try to keep up with, I still put Headhunters at the number one spot. Now, the basic setup for this is just that a professional art thief pairs up with a new team member for a heist and really kind of picks the wrong guy to pair up with. This movie is packed with twists and turns, little bit of action, and just some wild scenarios that feel grounded and realistic for this story, but just make for some insanely interesting moments that really stand above anything else on this list. And if you've been paying attention, there are some bangers on this list. I'm telling you, Headhunters is an insanely memorable thriller. If you like this genre whatsoever, and you like this channel because I turn you on to some great movies you've never seen before, make Headhunters the first thing you watch off of this list, especially if you're not allergic to subtitles. But that is the list. Don't forget to check out that Cyberghost link in the description, but I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this HBO Max episode, and you will see me on the next one.